It should not be thought that because the ancient Roman world was an oral culture, therefore great care was taken to preserve these stories accurately. Sometimes that's claimed. Well, in oral cultures, everybody tells the story the same way. In point of fact, cultural anthropologists have shown that that isn't how it works at all. That in oral societies, there simply isn't a concern for verbatim accuracy the way you have that concern in written cultures. The reason you have that concern in written cultures is because you can check to see if there's accuracy. So the very notion that there should be accuracy came about when written cultures developed. In oral societies, though, people who tell stories understand that when you tell a story, you tell it for the occasion. You tell it based on the audience that you're talking to and what their situation is and what it is you want to stress. So you'll tell the same story differently to different audiences at different times. That's how oral cultures function, and that's what probably happened within the storytelling tradition of early Christianity. Storytellers modified the stories they told about Jesus based on the context within which they were telling the stories. Now, this isn't just a theory that I happen to have or that New Testament scholars have dreamt up. In fact, there's solid evidence that when Christians told the stories about Jesus over these 35 to 65 years and beyond, they were changing the stories. The evidence we have is the fact that we have different accounts of the same story, and we can compare these accounts with one another. And when we compare these accounts with one another, we see that there are differences among them. And so what I want to stress is that the differences among our surviving written accounts, the differences that survive among our surviving written accounts shows that the stories were being changed probably not just at the level of writing, but the stories were probably being changed at the oral level before anybody wrote them down. Okay, so just so you're clear on how I'm imagining this. Jesus' ministry took place probably in the 20s AD. He dies around 30. We aren't sure which year. It might be 30, it might be 33, it might be 29. Scholars differ about which year. Sometime in there, Jesus died. The first Christian writings we have are 20 years later, the writings of Paul, who hardly ever mentions stories about Jesus. The first Gospels don't come about until around the year 65 or 70, and then they have Gospels written until about the year 90. Gospels continue to be written into the 2nd century. They continue to be written. But all these Gospels, where are they coming from? They're not coming from notes that somebody took when Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. There were no notes. The stories are coming about as people told and retold the events of Jesus' life, both the things he said and the things he did. These stories are in circulation for decade after decade after decade. They get changed in the process. Eventually, somebody decides to write them down. Why didn't they write them down earlier? Well, we don't know. It may be that there were Christians who wrote down the accounts earlier and we don't have the accounts anymore. But it may be that the earliest Christians saw no need to write down the accounts of what Jesus said and did because they thought the end of the world was coming right away. And for whom would they be writing these things? There's not going to be a posterity who needs to know this. And so probably, at least in Paul's lifetime, it probably didn't occur to people that this would be an important thing for Paul.